Hi, and welcome back to Timesheet Time, where we look at animation clips and analyze their timing, sometimes spacing, and talk about all of the small little things that make animation feel good. Today, I brought a clip from the game Zenless Zone Zero, which has a very stylized and exaggerated animation style, and which makes it really good to look at some of the basic animation principles and how they play into the feeling of it. Sometimes Zenless Zone can feel a little bit over animated, and Dan Floyd has a great video about that, which I'm gonna link above. Okay, let's get into it and start by looking at the clip. So here's the clip. It's from a cutscene later in the game, and it's very simple, but it also lets us look at things that make it feel good. So we're looking at this character, and if I play this slow, you're going to see that we have a huge anticipation and then a very quick snap into the position. And there's a little extra on the floating ball. So what do we have in terms of poses? We have our start pose. Our start pose is bent over forward, which is the opposite of what we have later. And we have this very big sword, which is interesting because it's so big and so heavy and doing a lot for the pose. Then we go into our anticipation pose, where we push everything in the other direction, like so. And the sword also is now in the other direction. And we push the hip out to this side. And the torso comes back here. And then we move on through our breakdown pose, which is very centered and pushing forward into our final pose. With the sword now forward, and also the new blades came out. And then we set her into our final pose, which is the same as before, but a bit softer. And the rest of the clip is all of the floppy bits like hair and code settling, and then we have a reaction to the action in the foreground, but we're gonna ignore that for now. We have our starting pose, our anticipation pose, our breakdown, and our final pose with a bit of a setup. Let's get to it and analyze these. They are on 749, our anticipation is on 763, our breakdown is on 777, and our final pose is on 791, and then we set her for 806, and this is our end. So this is the frames we want to look at, and I'm gonna start off by the main motion. The main motion goes from this frame we put on 763 up to this other one with 791, and we have our breakdowns at 777. Overall, this is around 28 frames. And if we look at it closely, we'll find that there is two other motions. This is like our extreme down pose, and from there on we go up again, so we need to consider that as well. And we want also around the 86, which is where we start the settle and come back. So we're gonna look at the head, and later we're gonna look at the sword. So let's trace the head by tracing the nose. Let's trace the nose. So overall, our motion is an arc that goes down and comes up and then settles. So now if we look at the timesheet, our first keys up until here, pretty slow. So we start at 763 and have our whole time going to 791. We are going to start in the beginning with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pretty slow frames. Our midpoint is around here. This is the breakdown we identified before. 777, key, and another key. And then we have our lower extreme at 780, and then we're coming back up. So I'm gonna put that somewhere here, 780, and then we're coming back up. So let's break down the motion at the top. And we're going in slow up until 770, and that's around 7 frames. So we have 8 frames, so around 3. So around something like this, and this is half together. So here's our midpoint, 71. This will be here, and then we speed up, going slightly faster, 73, 75, and now things get even faster. 85 is around here, 775, just so we know, and then we go really fast. You see this big jump, 77. We keep moving fast, and then we kind of slow down into the 80, and we start coming back up, which is a little bit slower, faster, and then we slow down again and put this here, and then we have a small little end here. So this is kind of what we get in this timesheet. And what we get is a slow start like this, then a very fast speed up, slow down, and then coming back up fast again. And what we identified were 2 extra frames that we need to remember. Our extreme down pause, 782, and then we have our extreme up pause where we start going slower, 786. And so let me draw this just so that we remember: fast down, coming up, and coming back again. Now if we put the timing on our line, we see that we have very slow start, going into a very fast thing, slowing down on the return a little bit, and then coming back up fast again before we slow down. Now that we have the face, let's look at the sword. The sword is doing the same thing, but a little bit more extreme. Let's grab another color and start with the sword. The sword starts moving at the same time as the character, and we're gonna put a little point here at the end. Coming up, and now we start moving fast. Still up here, going down, and then we basically stop. The sword is the same motion but exaggerated. Let's draw another line below that. We start similarly, but we start with bigger changes, and our extreme point for the sword is here, 779. So this is later than 777, but it is our midpoint. Let's try to make this relative to each other, so probably around here, so it makes a little bit more sense. We start moving around 77.1, so this. Now we need to put this into perspective, so let's put this here for the 71. 771, and up until then it looks kind of linear, and we have to put 65, 67, 69, 71, so it's a bit more linear. Then we go to 73 where it gets a little bigger, and then we have a jump to 74, 75. It's nearly at the highest point. We have to slow down a tiny bit. So let's maybe put enough space between here. And then at the top we slow down, hold this for a bit. This is the 80, and we're coming out on a very speedy 82. The next one is also very big, and then we stop. And 791. As we learned before, this short thing after this long thing will be very punchy, and this is what we get here. We get a very punchy stop. And in this shot, there is an additional thing about the blades coming out of the sword, because if we follow this point, you will see this doesn't really stop. It stops a little bit later, so this gives it a more of a chunk. The blades fire out. So big jump, small jump, punchy impact. Also, let's draw the line for this. Coming up, and then we go fast, slow, and then we have a slowdown in the end. So what we get is pretty linear start, then speeding up, slowing down at the top, and then very fast coming into this impact. This is the main motion. Now, if we look at the thing to start it with something, and in animation we use something called anticipation, which is basically winding up for all of that for us. We go into this pose where we are ready and everything is loaded. We have this curve that acts like a spring that is loaded into this motion later. Okay, how do we get into it? After all, we start like this. We'll also have a slower start, quicker motion, and then a cushion in. Let's go. Let's follow the nose. Obviously, what I'm doing, you could always do for other parts of the body. And it's very interesting to do so because you will see that, for example, the hip will do things slightly differently. So let's start. We have to keep one thing in mind. There is a lot of camera motion here. So let's analyze that first by looking at the background. So if we just track this, we can extract what the camera does. And the camera is slowly rotating and then coming to a stop. So you see, there will always be this camera motion. I'm gonna make a note so that we don't forget. 2D camera motion will impact how your poses flow and how all of the animation connects. I'm gonna follow this and track this in 2D space. This means this is the character motion combined with the camera because that's what we see on screen. You will probably have a different look in your 3D software, and when you make this animation, you think about it differently when you're doing in 3D. When you're doing 2D animation, this combines into one. So let's start tracking this. And then we have our pose. So it's quite a short motion. We started 749, 749. We have a breakdown, our lowest point here at 754. And then we come to a halt at 763. What does this look like? We find our midpoint. Our midpoint would be this lowest point before we move up again. This is 754. So we started 749, 763 is our endpoint. And we have a breakdown at 754. Before we go on, let's quickly discuss how we place these points on the timesheet. What these differences between lines mean is the motion of something relative to each other. So if we look at the full path length here, we see that our point that we chose as our breakdown, this one, is around 1/3. Then we have another third here. And then we have another third here. So if we put these frames onto our timesheet like this, we get thirds and we can fill them up. Let's just give that numbers quickly. So this is our 755 and this is our breakdown. And this is our 757, which is an in-between. And then we slow down after that, probably around here. And we have our last 3 frames. And it's easier to analyze it in this part than it is in other parts because it's fewer frames. This is already the motion. So let me just draw all of the frames so that you can see it. What we get here is a pretty fast start in this area. Then we have our main motion, our big jump here, and then we get a slow in. And after that slow in, we'll go into the next motion. These will connect to the next one. So if we look at what the next one is, you see we get this slow, and then we get this slow. If we connect both motions, we get something. We have a big motion, then the slow where these two connect, and then a big motion with the slow end. This is what the whole thing feels like when we put it together. Let's look at the sword for a quick moment, and then we're already done. The sword is starting up here. 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 And then we go into the next part. This motion is a little bit easier than before. We get, again, our timesheet. Start at the same time, 749, 763. And this doesn't really have a breakdown pose as in an extreme. But we can also look at all of the parts of it, like so. And we get our keys, and we see this is like 1/3, 1/3, and about 1/3. You don't always have to use thirds, it just makes sense for this part. Let's put them on the sheet and then put in the frames that we need. So we have the first frame, this goes very slow and then fast. Then we have our big jump, big jump. This is around another third for this. And then we slow it down into the final bit, like so. So what the sword does is similar, but it starts a little bit fast and comes to a stop in the same way. And that's it. If we play it, it looks like that. I hope this makes sense, I hope this was helpful, and I hope this gives you a little bit of an insight of how animators think about these slow starts, slow ends, how we think about impact when something is moving and coming to a sudden stop with a very, very tight spacing in the end. How contrast works with fast and slow motion in frames in animation. Alright, I'll see you next time. Have a good day and bye-bye.